The dawn following, when Noah Bennett vanished into a lodge on Main Street alongside a lady who wasn't his spouse, he viewed Ava for the initial moment as an outsider. She positioned herself on the sidewalk beyond the judicial building in a waterproof jacket, locks moist, one palm protecting her abdomen, while a dark Mercedes glided up resembling a silent judgment. Julian Reyes, tycoon, builder, and tempest in formal attire, emerged, the metropolis mirrored in his gleaming footwear. He parted the entrance for Ava with a tenderness that pained to observe. Noah had previously endorsed the separation documents. What he hadn't relinquished was the pulse. Portland dulls you initially with overcast skies, then with choices. Noah Bennett had mastered peering at the boundary between concession and capitulation. He operated a specialty design studio from a stone alcove in Old Town. 2 novice creators, 1 coffee brewer that wheezed like an exhausted beast. Assignments arrived in bursts. Eateries, a shared workspace, a neighborhood hub whose financing vanished at the 11th hour. Then emptiness for days. Ava Morales, prior to becoming Ava Bennett, and subsequently Ava, unattached, had served as his compass. A city strategist with a backbone of iron and a tendency to cite Lewis Mumford at gatherings, she navigated existence as if it were a diagram she could revise. They wed beneath illuminations draped amid redwood trees on Sauvie Island, pledging to render urban areas more compassionate. For a period, their goals aligned. She outlined districts. He illustrated how those districts would capture illumination. Then the slump struck both career-wise and personally. Leases escalated. Patrons compensated tardily. Noah gazed at bills and experienced a squeeze no bookkeeper could remedy. When Ava secured funding to test a people-focused residential initiative, Riverside Sanctuary, Noah sensed admiration sour into apprehension. She possessed direction and influence. He possessed a mailbox brimming with follow-ups. The evening with Lila Sinclair commenced as evasion and concluded as an admission. He convinced himself it was insignificant, merely a beverage after a forum on repurposing structures at a Riverside Inn. Lila conversed like a spark, swift and radiant. She chuckled at appropriate intervals and contacted his forearm with digits cozy and exact. In the suite, he overlooked his commitments to anyone, then recollected belatedly. He identified his visage in the obscurity. Another individual deceiving himself. Ava discovered the bill prior to summoning the bravery to inquire. When she questioned, she did so positioned by the kitchen basin, hand level on the surface. Was it a single occurrence? She uttered, tone stable, gaze unsteady. A single occurrence, he responded, aware of what mattered and what didn't. Do you adore her? No. Do you adore me? The reality emerged damaged and delayed. Yes, he replied, but the term possessed the consistency of dust. They both endeavored to embark on a vessel they'd already overlooked. Therapy sessions, adhesive notes bearing regrets, revised timetables, a fortnight hiatus to refresh the atmosphere, which is another manner to express inhale separate atmospheres. The metropolis didn't decelerate to aid them. When she informed him of her pregnancy, the heavens had brightened to an unlikely azure. They reclined on the rear stairs, legs contacting, and Noah experienced dread and optimism occupy a seat. It's yours, she stated. We created it before the lodge. He wept. He swore. He faltered. A fortnight subsequently, he encountered Lila once more, this occasion in a workspace with a panorama, the metropolis at an appealing perspective. He assured himself he was concluding it. He assured himself she comprehended. He failed to observe how skillfully the portal sealed behind him. The separation documents arrived in a beige packet that reeked of ink. They consented to benevolence on parchment. Face to face, they floated like unknowns across a pedestrian crossing, each feigning ignorance of the other's silhouette. The dawn before the judicial building, the Mercedes halted like a full stop. Julian Reyes emerged, a title that appeared in editorials and inauguration ceremonies, someone whose fortune was a climate pattern. Ava didn't glance at Noah, but she assented when Julian provided refuge from the precipitation. In that assent, Noah witnessed a 10-year span crumble. He gripped the beige packet and comprehended that forfeiting someone isn't perpetually noisy. Occasionally, it's the gentle slam of a premium vehicle portal shutting. Ava had not intended to be anyone's salvation. She had devoted her 20s in dim chambers with charts affixed to surfaces, mastering to convert human necessity into regulatory terminology. She trusted in a metropolis that could accommodate paradoxes, a cafe adjacent to a refuge, a green space divided by tycoon's canine, and a third grader's glider. Riverside Sanctuary originated as a draft. 14 levels of varied revenue dwellings, base-level childcare, an upper garden interlaced with spices. She presented it with a composure that concealed the quiver within. The subsidy encompassed preliminary expenses and public engagement. Building funds would necessitate a wonder or mogul. Julian Reyes is intrigued. Her initiative coordinator had mentioned, gaze sparkling with the ease of someone who didn't need to locate the funds personally. He favors enduring endeavors. He favors atonement narratives. Ava didn't recoil at the term. Atonement had been utilized as a weapon near her recently. When Julian extended an invitation to a meal at a serene eatery in Pearl District, he absorbed more than he articulated. He observed individuals the way certain gentlemen observe investments. Riverside Sanctuary is refined, he remarked, tapping the layout blueprint. It will endure beyond us both. I trust so, she responded, assessing him with the identical instrument she employed for age structures. Is it redeemable? I don't desire your title on the exterior. He grinned. What message do you wish to convey? Residence. He committed as primary sponsor with a gesture that appeared benevolent and was also tactical. His contribution included stipulations that resembled velvet. Consultative supervision, rejection authority over builders, initial option on base-level commerce. We progress quicker if I bear some of the load, he remarked. Red tape will consume you entirely. She recalled being consumed in minor ways, by uncertainties, by gentlemen who confused her precision for an enticement. She also recalled the aroma of Noah's polo shirt, the one he donned when drafting late. Espresso and charcoal, a residence her faculties persisted in claiming still persisted. When she disclosed to Julian she was expectant, she didn't weep. In the hush after the declaration, he assented, a palm shifting a bit toward her before withdrawing. You'll require a safeguard, he stated. Press sponsors the metropolis. Individuals can be benevolent until they detect advantage. Come operate from my workspace. Utilize my chauffeur. Permit me to soak up the clamor. It resonated like a barrier and sensed like a web. She desired to be resilient enough to endure in downpour and label it climate. But there was another reality. The weariness that no slumber could mend. The manner the infant made choices with her physique. She contemplated Noah, his remorse messages piled like stones, his quietude amid them more resonant, and resolved that seeking assistance wasn't capitulation if she drafted the conditions. All right, she stated. I'll employ your workspace, but I retain command of the public procedure and no photographers unless I approve. He tilted his cranium. Accorded. In his realm, chambers unlocked before she arrived. 8 emerged with brew. The lift memorized her level, but there were costs invariably. A committee member alluded to Riverside Sanctuary as Reyes's favored scheme and snickered, as if that was endearing. Julian interrupted him with a stare that felt like an unsheathed sword, but the interruption impacted Ava's composure regardless. Evenings were the toughest. Solitary in her dwelling in Alphabet District, she hearkened to an antique timepiece tally instance. She yearned for the minor harshnesses of matrimony, the way Noah abandoned cupboard portals ajar since they were proof of closeness. She yearned for the way he uttered we when he intended I, and how he was progressing. She yearned for who she'd been before she had to become another to endure him. On an overcast Sunday, she convened with her companion Sophia at Tom McCall Waterfront Park. Sophia presented her a flask of peppermint infusion and the demeanor of someone who would assist conceal a corpse if requested. Are you involved with him? Sophia gestured toward a title on her device. Reyes's fresh residential enterprise. I'm involved with Riverside Sanctuary, Ava stated. And the infant is mine, Ava declared, and they both chortled, which rendered the droplets simpler. Later, Sophia clasped her palm. You can accomplish this with or without them. Ava assented. The infant shifted, a mild twist, and she had the notion that astonished her with its delightfulness. You and me, little one, we're going to construct a residence. Noah's workspace reeked of blueprint rolls and outdated espresso, and the specter of an aspiration that hadn't dusted in a while. After the judicial building, he devoted hours reorganizing his volumes, then seated himself, an accomplished zilch. He attempted to draft and generated a tense tangle. He attempted to peruse building regulations and dozed off, awakening abruptly, as if apprehended pilfering. The enterprise Bennett designs was two individuals and a builder named Jake who addressed him chief, with jovial irony. "You all right, dude?" Jake inquired, reclining in the entryway. "Define all right?" Jake regarded him the way one regards framework, ensuring it would endure. "We secured the Knob Hill Bistro renovation. Demolition commences Wednesday." "Correct," Noah stated, appreciative for something that didn't demand a remorse. What he didn't articulate, Lila had messaged that dawn. "You okay?" A basic square of a communication that caused his gut to slant. He composed and deleted replies until his device glided face downward onto the table like a downed sparrow. He convened with Sophia for espresso because he relied on her to inform him when he was being absurd. She had encountered Ava initially, then resolved to endure Noah as an appendage. That was how it sensed occasionally. He was an addendum to his own existence. "You appeared like trouble," she stated, presenting him a pastry and squinting her gaze. "What did you do after the judicial building?" "Went to the workspace, attempted to labor, and botched it both." "Good," she stated. "Botching at labor is a progression. It signifies you aren't feigning it's okay. Do individuals recover from this?" He questioned, astonishing himself. "Not the matrimony. I know that's presumptuous to presume. I mean, from being the gentleman who performs the act he vowed he'd never perform. Only if they cease portraying themselves as sorrowful protagonists," Sophia imbibed. "You aren't exceptional. You're merely someone who permitted an injury to steer the vehicle." He exhaled a chuckle. "That's reassuring in a manner. What are you going to do?" she questioned. "Labor. Remain clear-headed around my device. Be attentive when Ava permits me to be. And discover who Lila truly is." Sophia elevated an eyebrow. "Why?" "Because it doesn't compute," he stated, the strand pulling at his thoughts. "The way she appeared, the timing, the subsequent encounter. I'm not claiming I'm not accountable. I am. But I believe I was also beneficial." "That is the most masculine declaration I've heard this week," Sophia stated, then mellowed. "But perhaps you're correct. So investigate. Just don't confound sleuthing with atonement." He assented and proceeded to the bistro location. He gauged partitions, hearkened to the structure settle, noted how illumination curved at 3 p.m., a career muscle recalling itself. In the dusk, he ambled without aim until the downpour located him. He halted before the riverside and, like a gentleman, examining the site of a blaze he ignited. "Noah," a voice uttered behind him. Lila Sinclair donned a golden overcoat and the demeanor of someone who invariably located the lens. She inclined her cranium. "You vanished." I collapsed silently. "That too," she stated not unkindly. "Do you wish to converse?" He did not. He also did. They seated in the parlor. He encircled his fingers around a fizzy water like it might disclose. "Who dispatched you?" he inquired ultimately. Her grin fractured, which rendered her more attractive and less perilous. "What causes you to think I was dispatched?" "The coincidence bears marks." She regarded her goblet, then at him. "I labor for an organization that organizes results. Sometimes that entails matching contributors with purposes. Sometimes it entails matching troublesome gentlemen with diversions." He gulped. "Who employed you?" "I can't disclose. Can't or won't." "Both," she stated, and he perceived abruptly an individual attempting to preserve her position and her essence. "But I can disclose this. You were already tumbling. I was a precisely timed breeze." Fury and relief executed an awkward waltz in his torso. He selected neither. "Ava is expectant," he stated because he required Lila to know what narrative she contacted. Lila recoiled. "No, I didn't know. I vow he trusted her." He also despised that any of it necessitated trust. "If you recall anything that assists me safeguard her about who desired me out of her sphere, inform me." She assented. "I'll attempt." She scrawled a digit on a mat. "That's my private line. If you dial my labor line, you'll receive nothing but hello." Outside, the downpour had tempered to a subtle persistence. Noah tucked the mat in his pouch and contemplated lines on a blueprint. Weight-bearing, non-weight-bearing. and how he had confused one for the other. He returned to a dwelling that reverberated, then composed Ava an electronic message he didn't dispatch. I am mastering the form of my non-existence. Lila Sinclair's youth instructed her to interpret spaces quicker than tomes. A parent who vanished and reappeared with tales like loose fasteners, a sequence of dwellings that gauge time and proprietor footsteps. She mastered that individuals who desired something narrated prettier deceptions than individuals who desired nothing. By 24, she was forging a vocation out of deciphering yearning. Her organization termed it tactical sway. Clients termed it prudence. She termed it lease. When she was allocated Bennett, she perused his dossier like a screenplay. Modest enterprise, grand ideals. Wed to a lady on the verge of a substantial civic triumph. Target weaknesses in bold. Cash flow on ease. Male pride in downer. A record of silent self-sabotage masked as artistic concession. The client protected. Payment channeled through a contributor-guided fund. Outputs. Compromising facade. Believable hearsay. Postpone emotional capacity. She assured herself she was supplying a prod, not a thrust. Then she encountered Noah. He regarded her the way truthful gentlemen regard illumination, appreciative and fatigued. She had not planned on appreciating him. That complexified the perspectives. After the Riverside Inn, she returned home and sat on a pristine sofa and gazed at the pane. The metropolis outside performed its quiver and radiance. She had messaged her supervisor, task completed. She composed and then erased a second communication. He's not constructed for this. And then gnawed her lip until it ached. The subsequent encounter had been arranged. A fortuitous invitation to a morning seminar. A haphazard arrangement chart. Noah entered the chamber, as if into a reflection of himself. She observed the conflict in his shoulders, and something in her unraveled. When he departed the parlor after their discussion, she phoned her supervisor. "I'm done," she stated. "You don't get to be done," the voice responded, a composure refined by corporate air. "Then regard me troublesome." Quietude. Then a fresh voice, elder, devoid of astonishment. "Lila, this is Julian Reyes. I hear you're meddling with an setup." She rose. The title disoriented her, the way disturbance does when you've overlooked your aloft. "Mr. Reyes," she stated, purchasing a moment, too. "I don't know what setup you mean." He disregarded the deception with career courtesy. "You were engaged to assist Mr. Bennett progress from a union that no longer benefited either side." She chortled because deceptions merit laughter occasionally. "Is that what we're labeling it?" "It's what it was," he stated, almost tender. "You know the boundary between destiny and interference is mostly storytelling." Inform the expectant lady that. He didn't articulate for an instant. When he did, his tone altered. Tinier, less steel. "I didn't know she was expectant. Now you do." "I don't want her injured," he stated, and Lila heard a note she had not anticipated. Defensiveness with a crack. "Terminate your participation. No more interaction with Noah. Regard your agreement finished." "And my compensation dispersed." Naturally. She disconnected and gazed at her overhead until the unevenness in her chest stabilized. She started to maintain a distinct dossier. Electronic messages that reeked of decay, notes about narrative conflict, a chronology that aligned to Ava's delivery date like a shade. She wasn't an informant. She was someone who identified a precipice when she saw one and had resolved to cease pushing. When Noah inquired who had employed her, she could not disclose because authority employs multiple disguises, but she could bring a flame to the mist. She dispatched him a solitary electronic message that evening from a fresh account. "Examine Riverside Sanctuary's terrain rental supplement, the one your former spouse endorsed with consultative supervision." She shut her portable computer and exhaled. She was not a champion. She desired to slumber through the subsequent month and awaken in existence with less justification. The metropolis did not assure her that. It assured nothing, which was in its way truthful. Julian Reyes declined to be astonished by tempests. He favored possessing umbrellas beforehand. His riches was a collection of contingencies. A delivery startup sold before the downturn. A property collection assembled before areas learned their titles. A series of information hubs that buzzed beneath verdant covers. He'd wed once briefly to a lady who regarded his schedule like a rival kingdom. The separation agreement was liberal and hushed. He mastered the expense of fondness marketed as shares. Ava did not appear like in purchase. She appeared like a benchmark he had not achieved. When she discussed Riverside Sanctuary, she drew connections from past to present, from guidelines to entry light, and he saw his funds alter from authority to repentance. He had not deliberately aimed to explode a union. He had, nevertheless, mastered that some alliances were conflict points. He had also mastered how to assist destiny along without leaving traces. The organization that located Lila had been suggested by a gentleman who owed Julian a favor. The favor had been invoked with 3 declarations and no subjects. When Lila uttered the word expectant, he proceeded to the pane of his edge workspace and gazed out at a metropolis he could shift and not alter. He contemplated his parent, a caregiver's assistant, who had trusted that funds meant issues concluded when the invoices were settled. He wished they were accurate. He went to Ava's dwelling that dusk, not because he doubted her resilience, but because he comprehended the challenge of absorbing benevolence while constructing a stronghold. He brought broth. It was an awkward motion, but genuineness, untrained, always appears like secondhand apparel. "You don't have to deliver meals," she stated at the entrance, grinning despite herself. "I don't have to do most things I do," he stated. This one seemed innocuous. They dined at her modest table. The timepiece tallied. Outside, precipitation drummed the canopy. "I conversed with someone today," he stated ultimately. "An individual I shouldn't need to converse with. She informed me some news I should have learned from you, but I didn't. I'm regretful for that." Ava observed him the way you observe a canine you can't interpret. Inquisitive, wary. "I would have informed you this week," she stated. "I was attempting to express it without making it about you." "Nothing is about me that I don't make about me," he stated wry, surprised by his own frankness. "I want to assist Ava. Not possess, not adorn. Assist. You don't get to do only the parts of assist that make you feel honorable," she stated, and the declaration landed between them with the gratifying heft of something authentic. "You come with vividly tinted chords. I have an infant to develop. I have an initiative to guide. I have a backbone, in case you overlooked it." He chortled softly, noted. She regarded him, truly regarded, seeing beyond the periodical sheen. Why Riverside Sanctuary? Why me? He could have stated branding. He could have stated heritage. He could have stated the truth disguised as tactic. He stated, "Because once when I was a lad, we resided in a vehicle for a month while my parent awaited a lease payment. Because a lady with a notepad informed us we were fortunate to get in coupon. Because I think about that word every time I enter a structure under my name. I am weary of building spires that gaze at the water and feign they're kinder than they are." Ava's countenance softened. "Thank you for not deceiving. I try to save my deceptions for the marketplace." He stated, "It hasn't made me many companions." "Money's companions are conditional," she stated. "You know this." "Yes," he hesitated. "I also know I made a disorder by trying to clean quietly." She didn't ask for details. She didn't want the backdrop peeled back farther than necessary. "Here are my terms," she stated steady. "You fund without rejection. You advise when asked. You never speak to anyone who can influence my life without telling me first. And if I say no photographers, it means no photographers." He assented. "Agreed. And Julian, if the father of my child shows up differently than he has, you don't get to decide I need protecting from that either." The word father landed like a new staircase. He felt something in himself accept a limit and relax. Understood. He left that night aware of a new gravity. Power recognizes with both resentment and relief the rare person who is not dazzled by it. He had a line to walk now. Influence without insertion. He had never done that well. He would try. Later, in bed, with his city view blurred by rain, Julian made a call to his most discreet advisor. Find out everything about Bennett. Quietly. He didn't need to explain. The advisor understood. The man was a liability, a potential complication in a narrative Julian was carefully crafting. He wanted Ava, not just for the project, but for the quiet way she made him feel human again. And Noah Bennett was in the way. The next morning, Noah woke to an avalanche of clarity. He found it by accident at first, a clause buried in addendum almost nobody reads unless compensated. Consultative supervision extended to approval rights in the case of material deviations from progress timeline defined by a schedule the sponsor's board set. If the metropolis delayed permits, which metropolises do like breathing, the sponsor could intervene to ensure project viability. including temporary leadership adjustments. He stared until the words arranged into the shape of a trap. He called Lila's new number with his heart in his throat. "I found it," he said when she answered. "Good," she said, relief coloring her voice. "You were part of this," he said. Not a question and not an accusation. "Exactly. I was part of a machine," she said. "We're all part of machines. I'm trying to stop mine from grinding your ex-wife's life." "What do I do?" he asked, and the humility of it felt like a borrowed shirt that finally fit. "Tell Ava," Lila said. "She'll hear it from you if you've built a bridge since you burned the last one." He wrote the email 3 times. He deleted all 3. He texted, "Riverside Sanctuary Addendum gives sponsor power to replace you if permits are delayed. Please look. This isn't to win points. It's to warn." He put his phone down and picked it up and put it down again until the device became an enemy. No reply. He didn't deserve one. He went to the bistro site and worked until his body remembered satisfaction. He ate a sandwich sitting on an overturned crate and didn't scroll. That night he showed up at a recovery group meeting in a church basement, though his addiction was not a substance, but a behavior that numbed like one. He listened to men and women talk about the wreckage of choices that felt like oxygen at the time. When it was his turn, he stood. "I'm Noah," he said, voice thinner than usual. "I'm here because I broke a promise, and then broke myself trying to narrate that as character development. I'm here because I want to be a father who doesn't need a crisis to do the right thing." After a man named George clapped him on the shoulder. "You're in the right room," he said. "We don't do magic here, but we do time." Time, it turned out, provided responses. At midnight, Ava replied to his text. "I saw the clause. I hate that I needed you to find it for me, but I'm grateful you did. We'll talk at the community meeting tomorrow. Don't make it about you," he wrote. Understood. The community meeting at the neighborhood center was the kind that makes democracy look beautiful and itchy. Folding chairs, bad coffee, a whiteboard with Riverside Sanctuary bullet points. Ava stood at the front, tired and luminous. Julian stood to the side, an observer with a wallet. Noah sat in the back row, because humility has geography. "I want to be transparent about funding," Ava said, marker clicking. "There's an addendum that gives our sponsor more power than I'm comfortable with. We will amend it." An older woman raised her hand. "Honey, can you amend tycoon?" Laughter rippled, then quiet. "We can amend a contract," Ava said. "And we can change who's invited to the table. That includes everyone here." Julian stepped forward, unexpected, without a microphone. "I support the amendment," he said. "No rejection, power advisory only. I want this project to serve the community, not my ego." A man in a baseball cap muttered, "Funny way to say that with a watch like that," but the room nodded. Afterward, in the parking lot's wet sodium light, Ava approached Noah. He got his feet too fast, nerves spiking. "Thank you," she said. The words were bruised and warm. He nodded. "You don't owe me that." "Maybe not," she said, "but it's true." He forced himself to keep the conversation simple. "I'm redesigning a bistro," he blurted, then winced at himself. "That's not relevant." "It is," she said, smiling unexpectedly. "I like when you talked about light." He looked at her and saw flickering the habit of us. He also saw the weight in her shoulders, the reservation. He swallowed the useless sentence that scratched his throat. "I miss you," and replaced it with something serviceable. "If you need me to talk to the permitting team, I can. I know a couple of inspectors. I know what words help. I will ask if I need that," she said, setting a boundary with elegance. And Noah, the baby's heartbeat is strong. His eyes burned. He nodded. "Good." A car door clicked. Julian's chauffeur. The Mercedes waited, black and inevitable. Ava touched Noah's arm, a gratitude that didn't promise anything, then crossed the lot toward the different weather of another man's resources. Noah watched her go, and felt for the first time since he'd broken his life. Not only the hunger to have her back, but the hunger to become the kind of man who could be accounted for. The city council chamber smelled like polish and performance. Riverside Sanctuary's hearing had drawn a crowd. Activists with hand-painted signs, developers in suits the color of influence, neighbors with grievances folded into their coat pockets. Noah found a seat near the aisle. Lila slid into the row behind him, wearing a black dress, like a statement. "I'm here and I see." Ava sat at the front with her team. She looked pale but steady. Julian took a seat 3 rows back, a deliberate demotion. The council chair tapped her microphone. "We are here to consider the Riverside Sanctuary proposal," she intoned. "We will hear from the applicant, then the public." Ava spoke first. She talked about design as empathy, about elevators that smell like fresh paint instead of fear. She talked about rent structures that left room for groceries. She did not talk about heartbreak or tycoons or the baby rolling under her ribs like a new moon. Her voice only wavered once on the word home. Then came the parade. A landlord who didn't like the way affordable sounded on his block. A teacher with a story about a student sleeping in a car behind the school. A man who kept saying property values like a prayer. Sophia spoke crisp as a bell. "We're not building a burden," she said. "We're building a future where my goddaughter doesn't have to memorize the bus routes of shelters." When it was Julian's turn, he stood and did the thing tycoons do when they try to be small. "I am providing funding," he said. "I am not, as of last night, holding rejection power. I will not profit from Riverside Sanctuary. I request that you hold me publicly to that." Murmurs. The council chair arched an eyebrow. "That's unusual." "So is sleeping in a car," he said. Lila leaned forward, whisper soft. "He did the right thing fast to avoid doing the right thing slow," she said, and Noah couldn't tell if that was a compliment. Then a woman approached the microphone with a printout, clutched like evidence. "This," she said, "is an investigative piece I was sent," and she glanced at Lila. "It suggests that certain influences were applied to the personal life of Riverside Sanctuary's planner." The air changed. Ava went still the way a forest goes still when a match appears. The chair frowned. "We don't adjudicate personal matters here. Except when personal becomes political," the woman said, quoting someone or everybody. Lila stood. "I need to speak," she said. "I was part of a consulting engagement that facilitated a situation which hurt a person who didn't deserve it. That person is Ava Morales. I cannot name my client. I can say that my actions were unethical, and I regret them." Gasps. Phones lifted like a field of small suns. Ava's cheeks flushed, then cooled. She stood and leaned toward the mic. "My private life is not a public process," she said, voice low, iron-laced. "But since we're here, I am pregnant. The father is my ex-husband who is not perfect, and is also trying. The sponsor of Riverside Sanctuary has agreed to relinquish power that does not belong to him. And a woman who contributed to my pain is choosing to stop. None of that changes whether Portland needs places for people to sleep and sing and make lunches. Approve this project or don't. Based on its merits, I will not be leveraged." Silence held. Then a smattering of applause grew into something sturdier. The chair rapped her gavel, irritated at the display of feeling. "Order," she said, ordering people who'd already organized themselves into belief. During a recess, Ava slipped into the hallway. Noah followed at a respectful distance, then stopped when he saw her wobble. She braced her hand on the wall. He reached her in 3 steps. "Sit," he said, guiding her to a bench. "I'm fine," she said. "Not fine." "Breathe," he said. "In for 4, out for 6. She obeyed because sometimes obedience is wisdom. Color returned to her mouth. She leaned back, eyes closed. Julian approached, urgency barely leashed. He stopped when he saw Noah's hand on the bench. Not possessive, just present. He lowered himself onto the opposite end. "I'm okay," Ava said, eyes still closed. "If one more man asks me if I'm okay, I will regulate private capital out of the city with my mind." They laughed because the alternative for all 3 of them was worse. "Thank you," she said after a moment. She opened her eyes. "Both of you and you," she added, looking at Lila, who hovered like an apology in heels. "Someday we could talk." "Not today." Lila nodded, throat working. Back in the chamber, the vote landed like weather. 6-3 in favor. Conditions, amendments, oversight. Yes. But the yes mattered. People hugged people they didn't know. A man cried into a mariner's cap. Ava stood very still, absorbing victory and exhaustion, then bent a slow fold. Noah caught her before the floor did. The room shifted into motion. Paramedics spoke gently. "It's probably blood pressure. Once that happens." At the hospital, in a room that smelled like lemon and worry, they listened to a rapid, insistent thrum. The baby announced itself like drums in a parade. "Strong heartbeat," the nurse said. "Strong kid." Ava looked at Noah's face as he listened, hands shaking. He was grief and astonishment and something else. A man letting love be larger than shame. Julian watched from the doorway, A hand braced on the jamb, eyes unreadable. He nodded once to Noah. Noah nodded back. It felt like a ceasefire negotiated by a third party, a small person with a fierce metronome. If Ava had believed that a heartbeat would solve the geometry, she would have forgotten her training. Cities don't simplify. They complicate and clarify by turns. The paternity test, that was data. It arrived on a Tuesday with the bluntness of a utility bill. Noah was the father. The paper didn't promise trust or marriage or a redo. It promised a baby who would inherit their eyes and their mistakes, and if they did it right, their better choices. Noah wept when he read the results in his car. He texted Ava, "Thank you for letting me test. I don't take lightly what this means. I'm here not only when it's beautiful," she replied. "You're welcome. Let's talk about a schedule after my next scan." He talked to a lawyer, Maria Lopez, recommended by Sophia, who said the words parenting plan like a map she'd walked. "Don't fight for more than you can sustain," she said. "Don't promise more than you can deliver. Demonstrate. Don't declare." He nodded and made appointments with his therapist like laying bricks. He told his team at the Designs that he'd be taking afternoons for birthing classes and doctor visits. Jay clapped. "Chief is going to learn hospital corners," he said, and the office laughed, a sound that felt like air. Julian called a press conference to say nothing substantive and everything important. Reyes Properties relinquishes any rejection power over Riverside Sanctuary and will support the project under the guidance of Ms. Morales in the city. Reporters asked if he was running for office. He said that would require tolerance for public affection I do not possess. He returned to his office and made calls that mattered more and drew headlines, less to supply chains to contractors who cut corners when nobody watched, to an old friend with influence over permits whose integrity he respected enough not to pressure. Lila, meanwhile, told her firm to keep the last payment. "Consider it the price of sleeping," she said. She sent Ava a long email with no ask, only a record how she'd been hired, when by whom. The names were redacted by NDAs, but the footprints were large. "I won't publish," she wrote. "This isn't about spectacle. It's about balance." Ava replied with 2 words that have repaired more rooms than speeches. "Thank you." The next months braided ordinary life with high stakes. Ava's belly grew. Riverside Sanctuary's foundation poured. Noah installed shelving at the bistro and learned how to fold tiny onesies without crying. He attended a birth class in a room where everyone assumed he was still married, and he did not correct them because the correction would take an hour and a T-chart. On a Thursday, Ava invited both men to the site. The concrete cured under a sky that had finally learned blue again. She wore a hard hat that said Morales in black letters like a declaration of jurisdiction. "We will need a permanent governance board," she said, with residents on it. "Julian, you can have a seat if you want one, but not chair. Noah, you don't get a seat because I love you and will keep boundaries between home and work." Noah grinned. "That's fair." Julian nodded. "I will fund an endowment for the board's operations," he said. "No strings on record." Ava looked at him, measuring again. "Thank you." They stood and watched a crane move. The city hummed. People carrying groceries, arguing about parking, kissing by bus stops. Living. Ava felt the baby roll and put a hand on her stomach. An unconscious benediction. "Name?" Noah asked for the baby. "I have 2 in mind." Ava said. "If it's a girl, Gabriella. If it's a boy, Diego, after my grandparents." They built their own house, Noah said, remembering the story of boards and nails and neighbors who showed up. "Yes," she said. "It fell down once. They built it again." Lila texted a photo that afternoon of a storefront in the Central District. A sign in the window, Sinclair & Co., Community Advocacy, Crisis to Cause. She had taken her skill set and reframed it. The homepage said, "We tell true stories faster than lies." Underneath, sliding scale services, a link to donate, a link to volunteer. Ava forwarded the link to Sophia, who replied with a string of celebratory emojis and a single sentence. Sometimes the villain wrote her own exit. At night, when the city quieted to its secret volume, Ava sat by her window and allowed herself to imagine the postpartum hours, the ache and flood, the baby's serious face, the way love would rearrange her molecules. She also allowed space for sorrow, for the marriage that had become a ghost with good intentions. She honored both. It felt like worship and like accounting. Labor arrived the way storms do when you live near water. Inevitable and a little theatrical. It was a Saturday in June. The sky was clean. Ava felt the first contraction in line at a farmer's market, holding peaches. She texted Noah. It's time. She texted Julian. The chauffeur is not necessary. She texted Sophia. Bring the overnight bag and don't let the internet find us. The hospital room had a window with a view of cranes and water. It felt right to bring a builder into a world of construction. Noah arrived breathless and calm. He had practiced his breathing in the car, counting lampposts. Sophia moved like she'd done this before, which she had with her sister. Julian waited in the family area with coffee and a book, and the expression of a man learning patience as a language. Ava labored for hours, a long swim to a shore she could not yet see. Pain dismantled her and rebuilt her as someone who could ferociously insist. Noah was astonishing in his willingness to be told exactly what to do and to do only that. Press here, she said. He pressed. Don't talk. He didn't. Tell me a story, she said. And he did. The one about a bistro corner where morning light made strangers look holy. When the baby finally slid into the world, she cried with outrage and then with the relief of oxygen. Gabriella, Ava said, a name and a prayer. The nurse placed the small, damp human on her chest. Gabriella blinked, confused and ancient. Noah cried in a way that rearranged his face. He looked at Ava with reverence and apology and awe, and for once he did not try to braid them into an argument. Later, when the room had settled, Julian knocked and entered like a man entering a church. He brought flowers that did not smell like flowers. He looked at Gabriella with a surprise he did not hide. Hello, he said, the word new in his mouth. You are very small. Do you want to hold her? Ava asked. He frowned, startled, then nodded. He washed his hands the way reporters always forget to describe, thoroughly with attention. He sat, and Ava handed him Gabriella. He held her like a contract, and then forgot to be careful because love arrived and knocked the numbers out of his head. Gabriella grunted unimpressed and enchanted. He exhaled. She has your focus, he said to Ava. And your stubbornness, he said to Noah, surprising them both. They laughed. The moment braided something that had been frayed. Weeks later, Riverside Sanctuary ribbon cutting unfolded. The building rose clean and intentional with balconies like smiles and a childcare entrance painted with constellations. The sign at the front read Sanctuary in letters that would patina nicely. No donor names. At the podium, Ava spoke about beginnings and maintenance. The work, she said, isn't cutting a ribbon. It's showing up on a Tuesday when the elevator needs repair and the childcare teacher has the flu and somebody's late on rent because life happened. The work is unglamorous. The work is why we're here. The crowd cheered because they were happy and because happiness is a public good. Residents moved in, pushing carts, carrying plants. A girl in a pink shirt pointed to the rooftop garden and gasped. Tomatoes, she shouted at nobody in particular. Lila stood in the back, watching and not taking credit. Her new nonprofit had a table with a mismatched tablecloth and a stack of flyers. She'd raised enough money to hire 2 staff and pay herself barely more than rent. Julian shook hands and then stepped away to watch the building be used. He put his phone in his pocket and let an email from a reporter go unanswered. He would continue to be a man with more access than most and a tendency to oversteer, but he had learned something about letting other people drive. Noah carried Gabriella, now 3 months old, in a sling. She slept with the serene selfishness of the beloved. He had repaired most of the damage of the bistro, which now smelled like cardamom and good decisions. He and Ava had established a rhythm that didn't pretend to be marriage. Shared calendars, Thursday dinners with Gabriella, Sundays where he took her to the park so Ava could nap. He was lonely and content in alternating measures. He had learned to let both be true. Ava walked the hallways and memorized noises. She stopped in the childcare and cried when a toddler handed her a plastic carrot. She walked to the rooftop garden and touched basil. She stood at the edge and looked out at a city that had tried to swallow her and had failed because she was indigestible. At sunset, she found Noah by the west-facing windows. They stood next to each other, not touching, inventorying what they had kept. I thought redemption would feel like a trumpet, Noah said, but it feels like dish soap and apologies that don't require an answer. Trumpets are for parades, she said. This is urban maintenance. He smiled. Do you ever think about us? She said uncomplicated. Of course, But the answer I keep getting is that loving someone doesn't mean you have to live with them. It means you live with your love for them until it changes shape. That sounds like you, he said. It sounds like me, she agreed, which is not the same as victory and better. Below them, the childcare lights blinked. On a balcony, a woman watered a plant and danced a little to a song only she could hear. The city exhaled. Riverside Sanctuary glowed. Sophia appeared with paper cups of cola, the fancy kind. To home, she said. To home. They repeated and drank, and let the word be a place and a practice. Gabriella woke and demanded the moon. Someone would figure out a way to show her where it slept. If this story found you, if you felt the sting of betrayal, the slow courage of repair, or the quiet relief of boundaries that hold, stick around. On this channel, we tell human-sized epics, messy, layered, and honest enough to feel like Tuesday night. If Riverside Sanctuary made you believe a little more in second chances, hit the like button so others can find this story. Share it with someone rebuilding from the inside out. And if you want more cinematic tales about imperfect people choosing better, subscribe and ring the bell. New stories are on the way. In the comments, tell me the moment you'd frame on your wall. The council vote, the hospital heartbeat, the rooftop garden. I'll be reading and writing the next chapter with.